I thought my wife was in the shower. Then my phone rang. She was already on a flight with another man. Everything I believed collapsed in 1 minute. The shower had been running long enough that it stopped being background noise and turned into something else. Something you start listening to without meaning to. 43 minutes. I know because I kept checking the microwave clock, pretending I wasn't counting. The kitchen smelled like stale beer and lemon cleaner, the kind of smell that settles into a house when someone's trying too hard to make things feel normal. My third bottle was sweating onto the table, and I hadn't even realized I'd opened it. Evie always took long showers. That wasn't new. She said it helped her think, said the sound of the water helped her rehearse lines in her head, melodies, breath control. I'd learned not to rush her, but this was different. This felt like waiting for something you don't want to happen, but can't stop. My name's Eli Marsh. I'm 38 years old, and until that night, I thought I understood my life pretty well. I run a vintage renovation business in Millbrook, Connecticut. Old homes, old wood, old things that still have value if you know how to look. It's the kind of town where people smile at you in the grocery store and still know exactly how much your house is worth, how long you've been married, and whether your marriage looks solid from the outside. From the outside, ours did. The phone rang, sharp and sudden, slicing through the steady rush of water upstairs. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But when I glanced down and saw my sister's name, my stomach tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Sam never called without a reason. She was a Delta pilot. Schedules planned weeks out, down to the minute. She didn't call during flights. Ever. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thought you were flying to Geneva tonight." "I am," she said. No greeting, no small talk. Her voice had that clipped tone it gets when something's wrong. "I'm calling from the cockpit." I straightened in my chair. "Okay, what's going on?" "Is Evie with you?" I looked toward the staircase. Steam was creeping out from under the bathroom door like fog. "Yeah, she's in the shower. Why?" There was a pause, just long enough to stretch my nerves thin. "That's not possible," Sam said. I laughed once, short and humorless. "Pretty sure it is. I can hear the water." "Eli," she said quietly, "your wife just boarded my plane." The beer slipped in my hand and hit the table with a dull knock, sloshing foam onto my fingers. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking. She's upstairs." "I'm looking at her," Sam said. "Gate 47, Terminal B, Seat 12A, champagne in hand, wearing that blue dress you bought her for Christmas, the one with the silver buttons." The world didn't tilt or spin. It went still. Too still. Like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "That dress," I said slowly, "was hanging in our closet this morning." "She has it on now." The sound of the shower upstairs cut off abruptly. The silence that followed hit harder than the phone call. Footsteps moved across the bathroom floor. Light. Careful. Not rushed. Not relaxed either. "I have to go," I whispered. "Eli, don't..." I ended the call. The steps started down the stairs, each one deliberate. Someone humming. A tune I recognized, but not quite. Like a song remembered instead of practiced. "Hey, babe," a voice called softly. "Sorry I took so long." She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in Eve's robe. Same face, same hair, same green eyes. The tiny scar above her eyebrow that I'd kissed 1,000 times, and yet every instinct in my body was screaming. "You okay?" she asked. "You look pale." I stared at her. Not her eyes. Her hands. The way she held her shoulders. Something was off. Subtle, but wrong. "Sam just called," I said. "Oh?" Too fast. Too smooth. "She said she saw you boarding a flight to Geneva." For half a second, her expression flickered. A crack in glass. Gone almost immediately. That's ridiculous. She laughed lightly. Guess I have one of those faces. The refrigerator opened. She reached for orange juice. Evie hated orange juice. What audition are you preparing for tomorrow? I asked. Her hand froze. What? You said you were thinking about an audition? Another pause, then a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, that. Just something small downtown. Evie never downplayed auditions. Never. I stood. The chair scraped loudly against the tile. Show me your passport. She laughed again, sharper this time. Why would I do that? If you're my wife, I said, you'll know the safe combination. Her mouth opened, closed. Our anniversary, she said. Wrong. Her face collapsed, then smoothed into something colder. I'm sorry, Eli. The voice wasn't Evie's anymore. She reached up and peeled at her hairline. The face came off in sections. Underneath was Jenna, my ex, the woman my wife had replaced herself with. The truth hit all at once. Evie wasn't upstairs. She was already gone, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage was about to come apart. I didn't scream. I didn't rush forward. I just stood there, staring at the woman who used to be a memory and was now standing in my kitchen holding pieces of my wife's face in her hands like a prop from a horror movie. My brain kept trying to reject what my eyes were seeing, like if I blinked hard enough, everything would snap back into place, and this would turn into some kind of stress-induced hallucination. It didn't. Jesus Christ, I said finally. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded hollow. What the hell is this? Jenna swallowed. Without the mask, she looked older than I remembered. Tired. There were red marks along her hairline where the prosthetics had been glued down. Her hands were shaking. She asked me to do it, Jenna said quietly. She thought it would be easier for you. Easier, I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Easier than what? Then coming home to an empty house, then just disappearing. My chest felt tight, like something heavy was sitting on it. Where is my wife? Jenna looked down at the fake face in her hands. On that plane. Geneva. She left this morning. The room started to tilt then. Not dramatically, just enough to make me grab the edge of the counter. She planned this, I said. It wasn't a question. For months, Jenna admitted. The move, the music, career, Europe, all of it. A buzzing filled my ears. I barely noticed my phone vibrating in my pocket until it kept going. I pulled it out with numb fingers. A text message. I hoped you'd find out later, but I guess this is better. I need to do this for myself. I've transferred half the savings. Please don't try to find me. 8 years. Reduced to 3 sentences and a wire transfer. I read it again, then again, waiting for something to hit me. Anger, grief, anything. Nothing came. How long have you been here? I asked Jenna. Since early this morning, she said. She flew out on an earlier flight, asked me to stay, to make it feel gradual. Gradual, I said flatly, by having my ex-girlfriend pretend to be my wife. Jenna flinched. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound. You wore my wife's face and stood in my house. You don't get to talk about not hurting me. Silence settled between us, thick and uncomfortable. And you agreed, I continued. Why? Jenna hesitated. She said you deserved closure. And she said maybe after the shock we could talk about us. That did it. The disbelief snapped into something harder, colder. Get out, I said. Eli, get out. Now. She started to cry. I didn't care. She gathered the prosthetic pieces like broken porcelain and hurried toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. She really did love you, Jenna said. She just loved her dreams more. The door closed softly behind her. I stood there long after she left, listening to the refrigerator hum, the house breathing around me. It didn't feel like my house anymore. It felt like a stage after the audience has gone home. Props still in place. Lights off. I moved through the room slowly. The closet told the story first. Evie's expensive clothes were gone. The jewelry I'd never liked because it felt too flashy. Her laptop. Her favorite notebooks. What remained were the things she didn't need anymore. The leftovers of a life she'd already left behind mentally. In the bathroom, a note was taped to the mirror. The woman you married was always a performance? Now you get to see who I really am. I ripped it down and crumpled it without thinking. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, replaying everything. Every conversation. Every argument I'd brushed off. Every time she'd looked distracted when I talked about the business. Every time she'd smiled and told me she was happy. By morning, the shock had worn off. What replaced it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. She hadn't just left me. She'd rewritten our entire life to justify leaving. In her story, I wasn't a husband. I was a phase, a rehearsal. I showered, dressed, and went to Murphy's Tavern as soon as it opened. Frank was behind the bar, like always, polishing glasses. "You look like hell," he said. "My wife left the country," I replied. "With a music producer." Frank stopped polishing. "I was afraid of that." That was when I knew this wasn't just my story. And that was when I decided I wasn't going to let her control the ending. I didn't go home after Murphy's. I sat in my truck for almost an hour, engine off, watching people come and go like the world hadn't just split open. That was the strangest part. Nothing stopped. No alarms, no signs, just me, breathing, realizing I'd been living next to a truth that had been quietly packing its bags for months. When I finally drove back, the house felt different. Not empty exactly, more like staged, like everything was arranged to look lived in, but no one actually lived there anymore. I opened the workshop behind the house, flipped on the lights, and stood there staring at the half-finished pieces. Old doors, salvaged beams, a walnut cabinet I'd been restoring for weeks. Real things, solid things, things that didn't pretend to be something else. That's when my phone rang again. Mick. "I heard," he said without preamble. "Heard what?" "Frank talks. Town talks faster." I exhaled. "Yeah, she's gone." There was a pause. "What do you need?" That question cracked something open, not because I didn't have answers, but because no one had asked it without expecting something in return. "I need to understand," I said. "Everything." Mick didn't ask questions. He just nodded once and said he'd make calls. By that evening, I knew more than I ever wanted to. Luca Morel wasn't some misunderstood genius. He was a pattern, a carousel. Women in, promises made, lives burned down behind them. He didn't steal talent. He borrowed belief and never returned it. And Eve had believed him. That night, I opened her social media for the first time since she left. I scrolled through months of posts I'd half noticed before. Studio shots, European restaurants, hashtags about authenticity, reinvention, courage. Photos where she looked alive in a way she never had at home. What hurt wasn't that she looked happy. It was that she looked relieved, as if being married to me had been something she'd endured rather than chosen. I didn't confront her. I didn't call. I didn't send a single message. Silence, I'd learned, was the only language she hadn't scripted for. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane, not chasing her, watching her. Geneva was cold and gray, the kind of city that wears money quietly. I saw her from across a hotel lounge before she saw me. She laughed too loudly, touched Luca's arm too often, played the role she thought would finally make her real. The irony nearly made me smile, because the more I watched, the clearer it became. She wasn't free. She was performing again. The showcase came fast. Too fast. Industry people, fake smiles, manufactured applause. I stood in the back and listened to her sing without the safety net she didn't know was there. And when the truth finally reached her voice, when the cracks came through, when the room shifted and the illusion broke, I didn't feel victory. I felt closure. Afterward, she saw me. Her face folded in on itself like she'd seen a ghost. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Nothing," I said honestly. "I just stopped protecting the performance." She tried to explain, tried to cry, tried to pull me back into the story where I was supposed to fight for her. But I didn't. "I would have supported you," I told her quietly, "if you'd been honest. But you didn't want a partner. You wanted an audience." That was the last real conversation we ever had. Back home, the fallout came quickly. Charges, debt, calls I didn't answer, apologies that sounded rehearsed. When the police called weeks later, I wasn't surprised. When they told me she'd been arrested, I felt nothing. When they told me she was gone for good, I sat in my workshop and stared at my hands for a long time. Not because I loved her, but because I finally understood her. She spent her life trying to be authentic without ever being honest. I went back to work, fixed what could be fixed, let the rest stay broken. Months passed. The town stopped whispering. My name became just a name again. One night, months later, I met someone who didn't try to impress me, didn't perform, didn't sell me a version of herself. She just was. And that was enough. Because the quiet truth I'd learned the hard way was this: some people don't leave you because you failed them. They leave because being real scares them more than being alone. And the moment I stopped trying to be the man she wanted to escape from was the moment I finally became the man I was meant to be.